taught in one way or the other. And by your Holy Spirit, you will also grant reconciliation among those who had problems with one another. And by your judgment, you will judge with equity. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Bishop. Council, are we ready with this morning's witness?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, and members of the audience. We are ready to proceed with this morning's witness. We would have two more witnesses in order to finish at least this theme that we are working on, that is the muscling of the media. And hopefully this afternoon we would start a new theme to be announced later. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over to you, Mr. Thomas Jahate. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, members of the public. We are ready to proceed with the next witness. Mr. Usher, can you kindly get the witness?
I, Alieu Badara Sowe.
I, Alieu Badara Sowe.
Do swear that.
Do swear that.
I'll speak the truth.
I'll speak the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Good morning, Mr. Sowe.
Good morning.
I would like to welcome you to the TRRC and to thank you very much for agreeing to testify before the commissioners today. I'd just like to go through some ground rules with you before we begin. Can you just speak very slowly and loudly into the microphone to the hearing of everyone in the room? Kindly just allow a few seconds in between my questions and your responses to avoid any overlap and also to facilitate interpretation of your testimony in the various local languages. Just a brief overview of the topics that we'll be going through with you in your testimony today as I guide you through your testimony. We'll look at your personal information and your educational background, as well as your work experience in the various institutions that you've worked for in the Gambia. And then we'll look at the different incidents you've had in terms of arrest and detention within the different security institutions in the country. And then we will focus on the impact that had on your life and the life of your family. And finally, the commissioners will have an opportunity to question you, and then you'll be given the floor for any final words that you may have to say. Is that clear?
That's very clear.
Okay, are you ready to proceed?
I am ready to proceed.
Yeah, what are your full names?
My names are Alieu Badara Sowe.
And where do you currently live?
I live in the United Kingdom, in Portsmouth.
Okay, where are you from originally?
Numukunda, which is in the North Bank region.
Numukunda in the North Bank region of the Gambia?
Yes. And
when were you born?
In 1968, 1st of January.
What is your nationality?
I'm Gambian.
Okay. Kindly take us through your educational background, just very briefly.
Attended Sukuta Primary School from 1974 to 1980 and spent 1 year at St. Augustine's Secondary School in Banjul from 1980 to 81. And I attended Armitage High School from 1981 to 1986. I then went to do a general engineering course at the Gambia Technical Training Institute from 1986 to 1988. I've done further education. I studied politics, psychology, and English language as well at the Castle College in Sheffield.
That's in the
United
UK?
Kingdom. Yeah.
Okay, very well. Give us also a brief background into your work history. Just very briefly, tell us the different institutions that you worked for as a journalist and the different dates.
Different days.
Kindly, Mr. Witness, just kindly assume a comfortable posture. You seem to be strained.
Yes.
You can relax into your seat and just draw the microphone closer to you as well so that you're comfortable.
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Right. Got into broadcasting in 1990 for about 2 years, beginning of 1990 to the end of 1991, at Radio C radio station, where I did have the name Borom Jasi as a disc jockey. From there on, I left broadcasting, went to do technical work with a company called Gamtech Company in Banjul, dealing mostly with draftsmanship and surveying work. Right. From 1993, that was in 1991 to 93, 93 to 1997, I worked at the Point newspaper as a freelance journalist. And I went on to work for Sud FM, which is Senegalese owned radio station based in Banjul, from 1997 to 98. I then worked with Citizen FM newspaper and Citizen FM radio station from 1998, well, February 98 to September 98. To September 99, sorry. And then I worked at the Daily Observer newspaper as a reporter from 1998 to 1999. And then I became sub-editor between 1999 and 2000. And then at the moment, I'm working in the United Kingdom. Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us what you're referring to? Do you have certain notes, or is it your statement you're referring
That's
to?
my statement.
Okay, very well.
That's
Just
my
so that the
statement.
commissioners know that you're referring
Yes,
to.
because so many dates.
Yes, to refresh your memory. And you're allowed to do so, but I just wanted
Right.
the commissioners to know that that's what you were referring to.
Okay.
Do you belong to any professional bodies?
Yes, I did belong to the Gambia Press Union. I do belong to the Gambia Press Union, which I served as Assistant Secretary General from 1998 to 2000 when I left the country. And whilst in the UK, I served as the Secretary General of the UK branch of the Gambia Press Union as well.
Very well. Do you have any awards?
Yes. In 1999, I received an award for the Best Investigative Journalist and also an award for the Best News Reporter.
And I'm sure we will learn through your testimony how you came to receive those awards. In 1993,
Yes.
you've already mentioned that you started your work with the Point newspaper.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And before 1993, you were working with the broadcast media,
Yes.
radio stations in particular. And was this the first time that you actually joined the print media?
Yes, it was my first time to work with the print media. Actually, my first time to start working as a journalist, because when I was in broadcasting at Radio Seed, we didn't have any news agenda in the station because they were not allowed to broadcast their own news, so there was no need to have journalists there. It was like we relay the news from the national radio, which was Radio Gambia. I started, like I said, as a journalist at the Point. That was my first time starting work as a journalist.
And during the coup, you were still a reporter for the Point, is that correct?
That is correct.
And after the military took over, can you just tell us briefly what your relationship as journalists were with the government at the time?
I think when the military took over, journalism changed, and it changed forever in this country. The tolerance was gone. And because when the junta came in, they obviously banned all political activity with the introduction of Decree Number 4, followed by Decree Number 45, the National Intelligence Agency Decree. Most of the politicians were locked up And those who were out, some went on political holiday, as they call it. So the media was literally doing its work as well as what should have been done by the legislature. And there was no legislature at the time. And the regime was intolerant to press freedom, and obviously we were not going to get the media to hold them to account where they've already silenced the politicians. So it wasn't easy.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Sowe. It is also correct that we've received a lot of testimonies from different witnesses about the different trials and tribulations that journalists went through in this country and the campaign of harassment and persecution against them through unlawful arrest and detention, torture. Can you tell us if you had any personal experience of your own after you became a professional journalist with the Point newspaper?
Yes, indeed. Loads of it. I've even lost count of the amount of times they've locked me up just for trying to do my job. And but today I'll just focus on the ones that come up in my mind that I think are necessary to talk about.
Please go ahead and tell us about your first incident of arrest and detention whilst you were at the Point newspaper. Can you tell us when this was?
Our troubles at the Point with the junta started sometime like 8 months into the coup in March of 1995, precisely 30th of March, when we published a revolt that took place at the prisons involving security detainees that were in the prisons at the time. These were two stories, one authored by Pap Sen and the other one authored by Brahma Anes and myself. One was the front page story, which was Pap Sen's one. Our story was the back page story. And when this was published on that Thursday morning, the 30th, Pap Sen was meant to be traveling to Cameroon at the time with Ibrahim Asila, I suppose, to a conference, UNESCO conference. And I was in the office with Dada when we had a phone call from Pap's wife saying his check-in time at the airport was getting very close and she couldn't get hold of him on the phone and was getting concerned now. So
sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Sowe, but you mentioned a particular Dada. Who was that?
Dada Hydra, that's the co-publisher and managing editor of the Point newspaper at the time.
And what was Pap Sen's position at the time?
He was co-editor and also publisher.
What about Brahim Ernest that you mentioned? Who was he?
He was Sierra Leonean national working as a freelance journalist at the Point.
Yeah, please proceed with your testimony.
Right. When we received this phone call, so Dada said to me, he got a niggling feeling it might have to do with our story, but let's just go and check at the police station. So on arrival at the place, we were informed by one of the officers that Pap was actually in the serious crimes office of the building. So he proceeded to go there, where we indeed found him. And as Dada went to talk to him, he was stopped by the police and said he's under arrest. And I was also, they were looking for me. I need to also sit down, like I was also detained at that point. Now, Dada tried to negotiate with the police for him to take Pap Sen's place so they can release Pap to go ahead and attend this conference in Cameroon. But they refused and said, well, Pap was the author of the story in question, so it was to do with him. It's Pap they were going to detain, and then they asked him to go and fetch Brahma Ernest, which he did. And when Ernest came, all three of us were detained in the Serious Crimes Unit office, where we were just sitting the whole day. Even though we had a niggling feeling it's our story, but nobody told us why we were there. Our rights were never read to us. And we were there till the end of the day. We slept there on the floor on cardboards. Till the next day, in the morning, it was the same routine. Just sat there, nightfall, slept on the cardboard. But something happened that second day, because we were obviously allowed access to our family, and food from outside was coming from our family. And the serious crime unit officers were investigating a homicide on Old Primate Street, if I remember. And they were questioning these murder suspects right in our presence. in the serious crime unit office. And whilst the interrogation was going on, obviously in front of all of us, I did manage to make a story out of it. And when Ansumana Baji came to collect the food basin, I was able to sneak the story out. And this was published as a supplementary issue which carried our arrest as well. So they moved us, I think they must have been offended, they moved us from there and took us down to the Banjul police station where we were locked up in the cells with other felons, some burglars, murderers, all sorts of kind of people. And we were there for another 2 days before we were released. And then...
Okay, and Mr. Sowe, you mentioned that when you were arrested at the Serious Crimes Unit, you spent 2 days there at the actual office of the Serious Crimes Unit.
Yes.
You were not taken down to the detention cells.
No.
You slept on the floor, but they did not tell you the reason why you were arrested.
No.
You were not cautioned about your rights. Were you given access to a lawyer?
Not at that moment, no.
Did you have access to your family?
We did have a lawyer subsequently. I've come to that. We didn't have, at the time, yes, we could do visitations, but not on the 3rd and 4th day because we were locked up in the cells. In fact, our rights were all seized, visitation rights, food from outside. We had to share the little food from the staff in the cells. I can't say our staff because police were helping us out sometimes.
So initially, when you were detained at the Serious Crimes Unit, you had some privileges that were given to you. You were allowed visitation from family, and you were also allowed food from outside as well. And when you were moved to the detention cells, you became detained incommunicado. And all of your privileges were seized. You also mentioned that you were also detained with suspected felons.
Yes.
And what was the capacity of the cells you were detained in, and how many people were there?
I would say about a dozen in a cell. Cell must be too tight. There wasn't even room to sleep. It's because detainees take it upon themselves to sleep in turns, but in a situation like that, the last thing that comes to your mind is sleep. And I must also say we never had any toilet. You're not allowed to have a shower or bath or anything during that time. And even when we were in the Serious Crimes Unit office, we were only escorted to use the public urinaries of the building. And we were never allowed change of clothes or anything like that. And
what subsequently happened after you were then detained in the cells at the Banjul police station?
Well, we were there. We were questioned about our stories. And they wanted to take a statement. I refused to give a statement. I maintained my right to silence. I know Pap and Brahma Anas did give a statement. And then following that, we were charged and taken to court.
And what were you charged with?
We were charged with the publication of false news with intent to cause fear and alarm to the public.
And did the police explain how they suspected that you had caused fear and alarm to the public through the publication that was made?
Well, that was never explained. They just took it that our story was fabricated and there was no revolt at the prison. We made it up just to scare the public, and that was it.
And all three of you were charged with the same offense, Pap Sen, yourself, and Brahma Ernest.
That's correct.
And where were you tried?
We were tried at the Banjul Magistrates Court. Thankfully, at that point, we had 3 lawyers that came forward. Raji Hassan Jallo, the current Chief Justice, came to represent me, and he represented me pro bono, that's free of charge, for the entire duration of the trial. And Usman Silla represented Brahma Ernest, Alaji Abdullah represented Pap Sen.
And how long did the trial take?
It took about 5 to 6 months.
And what happened during the trial?
During the trial, they called a lot of prosecution witnesses, which included security detainees as well. The ones that stand out is Captain Ibrahim Akambi. And they also absurdly called one witness by the name of Lamin Jatta, who was actually in prison because of some fraudulent activities he was involved in during the early days of the coup, which I investigated and exposed. That's what led him to prison. Now they brought him in as a witness against me. But
and he obviously had a personal vendetta against you.
Of course he did.
And did he testify against you?
Yeah, I think the the landed Hassan Jallo called him straight out and told he was a completely discredited witness.
So what happened at the end of the trial?
At the end of the trial, the defense entered a no case to answer, and this was upheld. And the principal magistrate at the time, Christopher Onyo, even ruled that what happened at what we wrote, there was more that happened at the prison than actually what we published. There was revolt, there was riot, there was everything there.
So in fact, you were vindicated, and your story was upheld to be true by the magistrate.
Indeed, yes.
What happened after you were released to all three of you?
When we were released, I don't think the regime took the verdict in good faith, because we soon after learned that the immigration authorities were after Brahma Ernest to deport him. And at the time, we were very concerned about his safety, so the GPU took it upon itself to take Ernest into hiding in one of the executive members' compound. I remember it was Swaibu Konate's house. Kept him there while we negotiate with the American embassy and the British embassy to see if we can get him evacuated from here safely. In the end, it was the American embassy who assured us that if we can get him out of the country to Senegal, they would issue him with a visa to go to the States, which we did, and eventually he was issued a visa, and that's how he went to the United States.
And what happened to yourself after that?
Just carried on with the job.
What about Paps then?
He did as well.
And subsequently, tell us what happened, if anything.
Well, whilst when we were arrested on the 30th. This is going back. Yes. Obviously, the government printer, which printed the point, was barred from printing the paper as a consequence. And we had to resort to using a local printer, which wasn't really ideal. It was like printing on an A4 paper, clipping it together. So it became even more tedious doing the job.
And during what period was the printing department, the government printing department, banned from actually printing for the Punch newspaper? Was it before or after your arrest?
Day after our arrest. We were arrested on the 30th. 1st of April, I remember now, 1st of April. That was when the ban was imposed.
And would you say that was an attempt to actually shut you down?
It was an attempt to cripple our work, yes.
Okay, but you subsequently went to private printers and managed to print the paper,
yes,
even though it was on A4 sized paper.
Yeah, we then, and then in the end, I remember, I think it was the Ahmadiyya mission that ended up helping us printing the paper.
And can you tell two significant articles that were written on that supplementary article, which was printed on the A4 paper? I
would say one would be the murder case that came with our arrest as well.
And the fact of your detention, was that reported in that supplementary issue too? Yes,
that was reported in the supplementary issue. It was reported without a byline, but obviously the police can suss out that this is coming from these journalists because they were here when we were interrogating these witnesses.
So when you were detained at the Serious Crimes Unit, you managed basically to cover a story whilst you were there?
Yes, somehow.
And you covered the story of suspected murderers who were being interrogated by the Serious Crimes officers?
You don't really, the police, I don't expect police interrogating murder suspects in front of 3 journalists and just think that's going to go unreported. Doesn't make sense.
And you were still in that frame of mind of covering a story despite the fact that you were despite the fact that you were actually under detention?
Yeah, because when you go into this job, the one thing about Gambian journalism is if it's money, look elsewhere. But it's about determination and be really willing to expose things that people don't want you to expose.
So despite the fact that they attempted to cripple the paper and shut it down, you managed to, cover 2 very important stories and then publish it in defiance of the government?
Indeed we did, yes.
Okay. So this was 1995 when this incident at the Banjul police station happened, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Did anything significant happen to you in 1996?
1996, I think it may have been in May, yes. I can just refer to my statement. trying to confuse.
Please go ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
first arrest and second arrest. Okay, I think, well, in May of 1996, I got arrested with another reporter of the Daily Observer, Bruce Asimota.
And were you still at the Point newspapers at this time?
I was still at the Point newspaper.
And who was Bruce Asimota? My apologies.
He is a Nigerian national who was a freelance reporter at the Daily Observer.
Okay, please proceed.
All right. In the April 20... yeah, it's in the April 29 edition of the Point was, yes. I wrote a story about the Inspector General of Police summoning the commanding officer of the fraud division of the police over money that was kept as exhibit and that were missing at the police headquarters. Also part of that money missing, I think it was about the sum of US $2,200, was remitted to a freelance journalist who was also a freelance reporter at the Observer by the name of Fatmata Mahoy. He was a Sierra Leonean national, later became known as Fatmata Jallo. So I investigated and published that story on the 29th of April, and nothing was said or done about it until a week after, on the 6th of May, when Bruce wrote a story about police heads being reshuffled and some officers being reassigned as a consequence of what I published the previous week. So on that day, I was in Banjul on the usual beat, and I had information that Bruce has been arrested, and that some 6 police officers, 3 in plain clothes, 3 in uniform, have been to the Point offices on 3 different occasions looking for me. So I decided to leave Banjul and go back to the Point offices in Bakau. And when I got there, I just coincidentally met the last plain clothes officer leaving, and he stopped me. He just calmly said to me, I'm wanted at the Bakau police station. Well, he's not there to arrest me per se. It's just I'm wanted there. I got in his car, was an unmarked car, so of his data decided with another reporter and Sumana Baji to jump in Data's car and follow suit up to the Bakau police station. When we got there, after a brief conversation on the phone, I don't know who the officer in charge was talking to, turned around and asked Data and Sumana to leave, that they just were looking for me, they don't need the 2 of them. So they left, and I was there, just idly sitting there for a few hours or so, and then they drove me to Banjul.
Mr. So sorry for interrupting you. Let's just go over your detention at the Bakau police station.
Yeah.
Although you were told by the officer who came for you that you were not under arrest per se, when you actually got to the Bakau police station, you were arrested and subsequently detained there.
Yes, I was detained
for a few hours. And were you told the reason why you had been arrested?
No, I wasn't told any reason. My rights were never read to me. All they did was send my colleagues away and then detain me.
And subsequently, what happened after you were detained at the Bakau police station?
I was just there for a while, and they put me in a car, took me to Banjul, straight to the Inspector General of Police's office. At the time, it was FRI Jame. And I was left, just me and him in his office. And he said to me, you know, there are a lot of enemies in this police force who are trying to undermine my position. So this story you wrote last week, he said, this information must have come from somebody very close to me, and you must tell me this person. And I said to him, that's strictly against the principles of our profession. We do not indulge in divulging our sources to anyone. Then after so much persistence, he called the officers back in and said to lock me in the cells because I'm not cooperating with him. And then I was there. They take me out routinely on a daily basis to interrogate me, try to get me to reveal this source of information. And it was usually the assistant superintendent of police officers, about 4 or 5 of them. 2 I can predominantly remember as ASP Lamin Jabate and ASP Alieu Badara. They were always in these interrogation rooms all that time.
And can you tell us who these 2 officers were? ASP Alieu Badara and ASP Lamin Jabate.
Think Jabate may have been the commanding officer of prosecution. I'm not 100% sure, but they were both all commanding officers in there.
And do you know subsequently what happened to both these officers? What positions did they occupy in government?
I don't know. I wouldn't know now.
Do you know if ASP Lamin Jabate subsequently became the Minister of Justice?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
So he's the same ASP
He's the
Lamin
same
Jabate
ASP
that interrogated you?
Yes.
And these 2 officers interrogated you about your sources. They wanted you to reveal your sources.
They were persistent to reveal my sources of information.
Despite the fact that this was privileged information.
No, it's only not that. It contravenes the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, Article 19 of it. It contravenes Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and it also contravenes Article 9 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. These are rights, instruments signed by the Gambia government that they will protect us. So I think by trying to force us to reveal our sources was just breaching our fundamental rights.
And did you explain this to these 2 senior officers of the Gambia Police Force?
These people do not investigate or understand anything. They're just out there to intimidate, get whatever they can get from you. They don't use logic or anything, so whatever you tell them is just here and now.
So they don't care about the law?
No.
They were just after what they wanted?
Very arbitrary.
And that was your sources at the time?
Yeah. The thing was, among the team that were interrogating me, there are a couple of sources amongst them, and these were people that will come at night even and sneak in proper food for me and tell me the next move what it is, because they know if I talk they're in serious trouble, so they have to keep me sweet. So every time they planned their next move, I was literally a day ahead of them.
Very well. And you've already mentioned that you were not informed why you were arrested, but did you suspect through the line of questioning why you were actually there?
Of course, yes. It's only through the line of questioning that I know, because these people don't usually follow procedure and they never care about reading rights to you or telling you why you're being held. You're just held in limbo most of the time.
And what did they question you about?
Who did I speak to at the place? Who are the place of
No, I mean, what did they question you about? What was the questioning about, which led you to suspect why you were arrested?
You're still referring to the police fraud case?
Yes, I am, yes.
Yeah, well, because all they'll ask me is related to the story itself and the fraud matter that's being investigated.
Okay,
So I know that's why I was there.
Yes, and you mentioned that your story that you wrote for the Point newspaper was connected to the story that Bruce Asemota also wrote for the Daily Observer newspaper at the time.
Yeah, because when Bruce published his story, he insinuated that fraud matter, the questioning of the fraud commanding division by the IGP, is because of that issue that there is this reshufflement at the police headquarters. But actually, this come out with very factual information, and they believe that we've got a lot more than sources in there, close to the Inspector General of Police.
You also mentioned that Bruce Asemota himself was also arrested, just like you were.
Yeah.
Where did you subsequently see him after you had been arrested and detained?
At the Banjul police station. We ended up in the same cell at some point.
And that was how many days after your initial arrest and detention?
May have been up to a week. At the time, it was all just blur, so I can't really clearly record the sequence of events as there was so much movement.
And were you interrogated together at any point?
Not at any point.
And how did you eventually learn that that was the reason you were arrested together, because of the articles that you wrote? How did you figure that out?
When we've been in the cells, we maintain one thing, that we do not discuss our stories or the reason we are in the police station, because we were with so many people in one cell, and these people are capable of sneaking in intelligence officers as detainees to try to see if they can eavesdrop on whatever you're saying. So we never discussed it whilst we were in custody. It's only after our release that we really had chance to know, yeah, it was all in connection to both our stories.
And what were the conditions of detention whilst you were detained with Bruce at the Banjul police station cells?
Horrendous. Horrendous. I mean, it's so cramped. There's almost over a dozen people packed in this little room, with people with all sorts of this stench alone, with body odor. There's the mosquitoes at night. Even in the day, you'll be bitten by mosquitoes.
And you were saying this was a week into your detention, and had you been charged at this point with any offense?
No. Up to our release, because I was in detention for I think about 2 weeks before I was released, and Bruce spent a few more days there. But we were only released on a bail bond of $25,000. There was no charges levied on us or anything.
And how were you released?
Well, the Point newspaper management worked on my release and secured sorties for my bail.
Sorry, please continue.
I think after that, Bruce was released through the intervention of the Nigerian High Commissioner, if my memory serves me right.
But this was after your release?
After my release, yes.
Yes. Can we just go back a little bit and just look at the time after you had been bailed? Were there any conditions attached to your bail? What were you supposed to do?
Yes, when I was released on bail, I had to report to the police station on a daily basis. And one of the tactics was, when I report, they'll keep me there the whole day until the end of the working day, and ask me to go home, come back the next day, all in an effort to impede my ability to go around looking for news or to report. And actually, I was re-detained again on Monday when I went reporting as a normal routine, and this happy detaining officer just decided to lock me up in the cell, even though I repeatedly explained to him that I'm on bail and I haven't breached my bail condition. But later, the Inspector General of Police said the officer acted without orders, and he did it at his own volition, and my bail bond was quashed.
So you were detained even after you had been released from bail?
Yeah, for several hours in there.
And during the time that you were there, Bruce Asimota was still there?
He was still there, yes.
And you say that he was subsequently also released through the intervention of the Nigerian High Commission?
Yes.
Okay. And was he a Nigerian national?
He is a Nigerian national.
Okay. What happened after both of you were released?
Well, we continued to face harassment and intimidation from the police. They became very hostile to us. But then also there was a positive side of it, that I think we gained the trust of a lot more police officers who were willing to give us information, knowing that we'll shut them out. But it got too much in the end. We left the country, went into exile in Senegal.
Are you saying that as a result of the things that you wrote, yourself and Bruce Asimota were personally targeted by the police?
Of course, yes.
And why do you say so? Were there any other incidents after you had been initially arrested with him that cropped up later?
I mean, in what form was this intimidation and
Yes.
harassment? Yeah. Yeah, you would receive threatening notes through your door, and when you go to the police station, they'll make some comments that are clearly threatening. But what can you do? Because it's a war against them. And our safety was paramount.
Indeed, and you were not able to practice your profession and do your work properly. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So you decided to go on exile to
We
Senegal?
went into Senegal, where we lived for several months in dire straits. And when we couldn't stay there anymore, we decided, you know what, we were going back home and carry on with the job.
So how long did you spend in Senegal?
I was there 4, 5, 6 months.
Did you have any source of income there?
We had no source of income. Thankfully, there was a family from Birkama that based in Dakar, and they allowed us to live in their place for free and provided us with daily meals as well. But we had no money for mobility or doing anything out of that.
And during this period, did you have families that you left back home in the Gambia?
Yes, we did.
And what happened to them?
Well, you see, that's the trouble with, because as freelance journalists, your income is only based on the stories you write. Now, if you don't publish, you get no money. And as I was the breadwinner in my family, during that whole period, there was no money coming to my house. I remember at some point when the Citizen FM manager, who was obvious not to do with our story, but still went to my mom and gave her allowances at some point, just to keep them going.
So you became so desperate in Senegal that despite the dangers you previously faced, you still chose to come back home.
Yes, we had financial assistance from 2 media bodies, from actually the Committee to Protect Journalists, but this was sent to Banjul through the GPU, where there was obviously no proper channels in getting that money to us until we had to come and get it ourselves as well, and it was sit here and just suffer, or go use that money and move on, and that's what we did. We had to sell our possessions to actually get transport money to come back home.
So you subsequently came back home, and did you return to the Point newspaper?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Just to go through a brief recap so far, you said in your testimony that in 1994, the military junta took over. Yeah. In 95, you were arrested with Papsen and Brima Ernest, and you were detained at the Banjul police station, at the Banjul headquarters. Subsequently, in 1996, again, you were detained at the serious crimes at the Banjul police station as well.
Yeah.
Initially arrested at the Bakau police station, I believe. And you were detained with Bruce Asemota.
That's correct.
So this was in 1996.
Yeah.
Following the sequence of events, did anything happen in 1997?
Yes. In 1997, there was another prison riot. Now, it was different from the one in 95. I was arrested with Anas, and I covered it with Alaji Yorojalo. He covered it for the Independent, and I covered it for the Point. And we were arrested and detained for 4 days in the same kind of conditions as I've explained earlier. The only difference this time was that we were not charged or taken to court. And I think that became a tactic. I think they learned a lesson from the first one, that they can't push the judiciary around. And I thought now they'll just use it as a means of detaining us, punish us whenever they want to, if we do something they don't like. So we were there for 4 days and then released without charge. And
where was this that you were detained at?
So it was the Bakau police station.
You were detained at the Bakau police station?
No, Kairaba police station.
Kairaba police station. And you said it was in relation to another prison riot
disturbance,
that happened. And this was in 1997, I presume.
Yes.
And the police learned from their first experience and knew that they could not make a charge stand against you. So instead they decided just to detain you and punish you for the offense.
Yeah.
So they became basically the accuser and the court and jury.
And everything, yeah.
All right. What happened after you were arrested, detained, and released with Alaji Yoro Jallow?
Carried on working, well, presumably that's when I went to join Citizen FM afterwards, and New Citizen newspaper.
And before we get there, who was Alaji Yoro Jallow?
He was a journalist and presumably the co-proprietor and publisher of the independent newspaper.
And obviously, we've received numerous testimonies about the different arrests and detentions that he also suffered.
Yeah.
So I believe this was one of them.
That is one of them, yes.
And subsequently, in 1999, did anything significant happen to you?
Yes, indeed.
Please go
Excuse
on
me.
and tell us.
Yeah,
That's all right.
in 1999, I remember it was one September morning, I reported for work, and this time the Daily Observer have changed ownership from Kenneth Best to Amadou Samba. It was the owner then.
Mr. Sowe, just to clarify, up to this point, you were working with the Point newspaper.
No, I was now working as a senior staff reporter for the Daily Observer.
Yes, what I'm saying is that up to this point, when you started working with the Daily Observer newspaper, you were working with the Point before that.
Yes, I was working with the Point.
Yeah, the different incidents you've explained to us in your testimony were all whilst you were working with the Point newspaper.
Yes.
When did you subsequently start working with the Daily Observer?
Daily Observer was been in
You can refer to your statement if
yeah,
you wish to
in
refresh your memory.
1998.
Okay.
Yeah, 98.
And this incident happened in 1999?
99, yes.
Okay, tell us what happened. Explain the incident.
Right, I reported for work, like I said, one September morning, and I found Sari Yang Sise, the new managing director. He said to me, well, Serif Bojang, the editor-in-chief, has just been picked up by the National Intelligence Agency officers, and they're out looking for you. And he explained that it has to do with a story I wrote that was published that morning, captioned "Shooting at Kanilai." So, well, might as well drive me and take me to the NIA headquarters, that's National Intelligence Agency headquarters in Banjul, which he did. On arrival there, they asked Sariyang to leave, and then they ushered me into a room. It looks more like a conference room with one big table surrounded by chairs, and I was asked to sit there. This must have been in the early afternoon, late morning, by 11, 12 or so. And I sat there, with just some random man sitting at the corner, not talking, and nobody said a word to me the whole day until it was nearing closing time for work. So I turned to the man at the corner and I said, am I here waiting for someone or what's going on? And he just looked at me and went, if you value your life, you won't be here. And then just maintained his silence again. And I was there until around about 6 o'clock in the evening. And then some 4, 5 men came into the room, made me remove my clothes, my shoes, my trousers, my shirt, left with just my underpants, and escorted me whilst tormenting me to a little room that was just by the entrance as you enter into the agency headquarters to your left. So it's a tiny little room there, and they took me in there and locked me up in there without any word, without reading my rights to me or telling me why I'm being locked in there. And I was there, and they left me there till about 3 a.m. the following morning. That's when they came and took me out.
And just to ask, what was the reason why they stripped you naked?
No idea. They just asked me to take it off, and they may know I wouldn't be there arguing with them. They look violent and they look like very bullish.
Yeah, you said they were tormenting you. Can you just give us a description of what you meant?
They were saying derogatory words to me, as in talking about my private mates and just calling me what they want and just trying to upset me. And then locked me up in this room and turned their way away.
Can you tell us what the condition of the room was?
The room measures about maybe 1.52 meters. That's my own guess. But it's got a peephole facing the sea and another peephole at the front for the guards to come and watch, keep an eye on you. And inside, the walls are smeared with what appears to be blood. And these are splatters. You could tell maybe somebody has been tortured here or had encountered some nasty. And the floor was damp with a lot of crawling things and mosquitoes in there. And the stench, it smells like dead flesh. And that's where they kept me. And they brought bucket in case when nature calls. That's why I have to do it. And they never even emptied it. Just left it there.
And you were expected to sleep where?
On the floor, on the damp floor.
Together with the crawling insects?
Everything in there, yeah.
Right. So it was, you said at 3 a.m.
At 3
something
a.m.
happened. Tell us,
Yeah.
please.
At 3 a.m. they came and took me out of the cell and took me to the same place, that room I was in that morning, with this what looked like a conference hall. And then this same kind of men came back again, that came in the afternoon, put me in the cell. But this time, their demeanor and mannerisms just could tell me they seemingly look drunk. Well, you can smell alcohol on them. But you could tell they were on other substances as well because of the temperamental way they were behaving, and they were just very unreasonable, and they didn't look like they even investigating or they just want to intimidate you and try to figure. All they wanted to know was, who did I speak to in Kanilai? That told me all this story I wrote. And
Mr. Sowe, before we move any further, just tell us what the story was about. This
this
shooting
story
at Kanilai.
Yeah, what happened? We got information that the Jame was moving arms. Well, the Senegalese authorities finally got information he was moving arms to Kanilai, and they were concerned that some of these arms might end up in the hands of the rebels in Casamance. So they set up surveillance by the border with Casamance there, and on this occasion they flew a helicopter over Kanilai and zoomed in the area, and then the soldiers on the ground started shooting. And this was what the story was about. It was a shooting incident in Kanilai. Well, their concern was the source of the story, and they were particularly angry about a paragraph that was in my story, but it wasn't even part of the publication. This was on my original script, which was with the paper. Because on the next day, they told me the reason they released, because they released the editor-in-chief, was that he exercised responsibility by editing some stupid thing I've put in my story. And what it was, this paragraph purported that when the shooting started, Yaya Jammeh went into hiding, and for hours they were looking for him. They didn't know where he was. And now they believe was that I was trying to put Yaya Jammeh as a coward to the whole world, whereas Sharif Bojang exercised responsibility in editing that aspect of the story.
So in the first place, this paragraph, which they were interrogating you on, had not been published.
No.
So it wasn't for public consumption.
No.
And it was actually confidential information, privileged information.
Yes.
And how do you know? How do you know how they got that particular paragraph? How did they get it?
Yeah, initially, when they told me that Sharif gave it to them, my original script to them, I didn't believe them. I thought they were just trying to play the good cop, bad cop, just in case wanted me to say something incriminating about Sharif as well, and I didn't want to do that. And when they told me exactly what was in the paragraph, it was only me and Sharif who saw it, because it was from news reporter to the editor. Right. And when I did come out, I did obviously confront Sharif about it. I wasn't happy that my original script, which is a property of the newspaper, was given to the National Intelligence Agency officers without a court order. But I later learned that he did so out of fear and under pressure.
So even though he knew that this was privileged information, he only gave it to them out of fear for his own safety?
You see, these people are so intimidating, and we journalists are not legally minded. See, the editor wouldn't have known that the way they come to you, you won't even probably have time to think whether this is the right thing to do or not, because when these people come and want something, they get it, if it's there.
Yes, but according to your testimony, Sheriff Bojang, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, he was branded as a patriot because he managed to, save Yahya Jammeh's name by editing that particular paragraph that you spoke of. And you were obviously unpatriotic because if you had it your way, that story would have been released, branding Yahya Jammeh as a big coward.
Yeah.
And as a result, did Sheriff Bojang get any reward for doing this?
No, it's strange because he became the managing director of the Observer, and then obviously we all know the Observer belongs to the regime and not Amadou Samba. And he later even became a minister as well. And so I wouldn't know.
Yes. When was he released?
He was released the day after.
So he was arrested for one day and released when they found out what he did. And you were kept for how long?
4 days.
And you mentioned that the NIA officers, apart from being drunk, were intimidating you. And can you tell us some of the behavior that they exhibited?
They had guns, they were banging on the table, and some had truncheons, because at some point I really thought they were going to torture me physically. And then their movements around me, when they're asking me questions, from walking from behind me, was just intimidating and nerve-wracking. And then knowing the horrific stories you hear about these people, you just don't stand there and be comfortable with that.
But did they actually torture you physically?
They haven't physically tortured me now.
So what happened subsequently after they interrogated you?
On the third day, they actually were very sweet to me. And they asked me if I could work for them undercover. Like, they've got a couple of journalists, they have on their books, they pay them wages at the end of every month, and they carry on working as journalists. And I told them it wasn't money that brought me into journalism, and I wasn't interested in being part of that list of journalists who would be doing that kind of work. I have very trusted people in high places who rely on, my integrity and ability to keep their anonymity without me turning into somebody who is turning up to them as a journalist and then going grassing them up. So I wasn't interested in that kind of work at all. The next day I was released.
Okay, so in fact the NIA were so impressed with your investigative skills that they actually wanted you on board their team.
I think it even gave me more resolve, because when they did that, if my story was a rubbish story and I wasn't saying anything truthful, why would they really want me to go working with them?
All right. And usually the interrogation sessions at the NIA, how long would they normally take?
They would take hours on end. And they're not asking you anything sensible, and they're not even investigating anything. They're just there to intimidate and annoy you and just make your life hell. They're not there to ask any questions.
And apart from the detentions of yourself, they were obviously also wanted to prevent you from actually sleeping.
Yes.
Since 3 a.m. was the time that they would normally wake you up and then interrogate you until early hours of the morning. So did you actually get any sleep during the day?
I didn't sleep at all, and I didn't eat anything. Because I remember them bringing me food, but I was warned not to take any food given to me in there by an insider there who's warned me that they could poison me, release me, and I'll be dead after leaving the place. So I chose not to eat anything.
You also mentioned the filthy state in which your cell was. Were you allowed to take a shower, or change of clothes, or anything?
You are only out of that cell for that interrogation at 3 a.m. I don't know why, but they only come about 2, 3 a.m. in the morning.
And did they formally inform you about the reason why you had been arrested and detained there?
Up to this date now.
But you suspected because of the line of questioning?
Line of questioning, yes.
So when did you eventually leave the NIA, if indeed you did?
On the fourth day, they just come and bang on the cell, asked me to go and wear my clothes, wanted me to tidy up myself because I came there in a smart suit. They wanted me to go and I said, no, I'm living here the way I am now. And got Sariang to come and pick me up. I left.
And were you charged with any offense?
I was never charged with any offense now.
And you were detained incommunicado during that time?
Incommunicado, not seeing anybody.
And this was the first experience you had at the NIA, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Subsequently, you had only been detained at the Banjul police station. Can we just move a little bit back to the previous incident that you had with Alaji Yoro?
Yes.
Jallo. Can you tell us what time or what period it was? I'm just asking this question because of the fact that I have received information that, in fact, the Independent did not exist until 1997.
I just thought about it. He was with the Observer. Not, he was freelancing for the Observer, not the Independent at the time. That's second prison, right? Sorry, I was meant to correct that.
Okay, so he wrote this story whilst he was freelancing with
for
the Daily
Observer
newspaper?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and he wasn't with the Independent
No, he wasn't
at the
the
time.
Independent. It was an oversight, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
No problem. Yeah,
were there any other incidents after you were released from the NIA?
There were no incidents again from the NIA, but on the eve of the millennium, that's on December 31st, 1999, which is obviously the eve of my birthday as well. So I was born on January 1st. Right about the stroke of midnight on the eve of the New Year's Day, I decided to take a stroll to surprise a friend of mine who lived around the corner from me. Now, walking through Latrikunda, I saw so much police activity going on there, and I decided to go and investigate what's happening, and aborted my trip to my friend. Just as I got there, the police and paramilitary just bundled me up, threw me at the back of a pickup, and then drove me to Karava police station and locked me up in the cells. And I know they know who I was, because as I got there, they were jeering and happy that, no journalist Alieu Badara Mutabi, that journalist called Alieu Badara, that's the one we've got here today. And I later found out what they were doing was rounding up illegal immigrants that were in the country. That's all they were doing. And I didn't see the reason they should hide that or put me in that place. And they made me spend my New Year's Eve there, my birthday there, and I was released on the 2nd of January. And
this was the eve of the millennium. This was not no ordinary New Year's Eve.
It wasn't no ordinary New Year's Eve.
But knowing you, Mr. Sowe, you just couldn't resist a good story. You couldn't just go about your New Year's Eve festivities and birthday celebrations. You had to go and get that story.
Yes. As a journalist, it doesn't matter where you're going. If you see a good news story unfolding, you go for it. Yeah.
Even though it always lands you into trouble.
That's inevitable here at the time.
And did you eventually get an opportunity to publish the story?
Yes, I did on the Daily Observer's Monday edition or so it was. I just gave it the headline, Alieu Badara's New Year Blues.
Alieu Badara's New Year's Blues. So you didn't have a very good New Year's then?
No, because I gave a detailed account of all the treatment they were meting out to people detained in there with waterboarding people and doing all sorts of people in those cells there.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
and this was where?
This was at the Kairaba police station.
And can you just tell us a little bit more about what you witnessed?
Well, I've witnessed somebody groaning, blood pouring out of his mouth, and the inmates in the next cell to us were shouting to the police to help out, and they just went let him bleed till he dies. And they've dragged people out, pouring water on them, kicking people, beating people with their truncheons. It wasn't a good place to be.
Yeah, and how long did you remain there?
There for New Year's Eve to the 2nd. They released me on the 2nd of January, the morning of the 2nd of January.
So again, you were not charged with any offense?
No, I wasn't charged with any offense. I just asked to report the next day or so for a couple of days, and that was it.
So you were just targeted because of who you were and then detained and punished?
I believe so.
All right. Subsequently, did anything happen?
No, as far as I can remember.
Can you tell us how long you actually stayed at the Daily Observer newspaper?
Been at the Observer till July of 2000 when I got sacked.
And just tell us how this all came about, your dismissal.
In May of 2000, I went to attend the annual training program for young African journalists in Egypt, Cairo. It's a month-long program. On my return, I was informed that the Observer has now changed hands and the ownership of the paper had gone from Kenneth Best to Amadou Samba. I found the Observer in a very, I would say the morale was rock bottom because of that. Obviously, the news editor who we all trusted know as a very independent person, Demba Ali was the first casualty who got sacked. And Dr. Babagale Jallow, who was then the editor-in-chief, obviously resigned in protest.
And which Dr. Babagale Jallow I refer to?
This Dr. Babagale Jallow on the high table there.
Very well. Please proceed.
Yeah, and he resigned in protest, and it was left with us. I wanted to leave at the time, but Sari Yang Sisiri assured me that my independence as a journalist will be respected and that there will be no interference in my work. But as it was going, most of us felt that's far from the truth if you see the way things were going. So at some point, the Independent did offer me a job. And then again, that's when I think I was elevated to sub-editor. And I was told just to be reassured that my independence would still be maintained in the paper. And so I carried on working. Now, in the interim, there was this political impasse in Guinea-Bissau. There was a coup, and then obviously the Observer sent me to cover it. But now, there's no problem with diplomats helping journalists. That's a common thing that happens. And I was made to travel in the Consular General of the Gambia in Bissau's car to Bissau. When I got to Guinea-Bissau, I was hosted in the Consular General's residence, whereas the Consular General is living in a hotel paid for by the Gambia government. And I couldn't understand that, and I just wasn't comfortable with it at all. I think a few days on to that, I conducted a vox pop in Bissau with Gambian nationals living there, businessmen and other immigrants.
You conducted what, sorry?
A vox pop, that's like...
Can you please explain to us lay people?
It's when you go around interviewing people on certain subject matter, like how are they being helped by the Gambia government while they're there? You know, do they have any access to consular services there, if they have problems and things like that?
Very well, okay.
And when I brought that back to the Consular Office, General's office for his reaction of what the people have been saying, I don't think he was very impressed about it. And he said to me, well, you're here to cover about the Nino Vera and Sumana Mane problem, and they're not about Gambia. So I'm a Gambian
And who
journalist.
was the Consular General at the time?
He was Momar Tal.
Okay.
So Gambians here are concerned to me. I'm a Gambian journalist, and if I come here, that doesn't mean that I'm purposefully just going to cover. And I don't know who you are to tell me, because the Observer can't tell me what to cover and what not to cover anyway. I just need your reaction, and reaction or no reaction, I'm publishing this. I'm just giving you the opportunity. And the next day, I was asked to move out of the Consular General's office to a residence. It took me to this run-down bed and breakfast in the middle of Pefini, if you know Guinea-Bissau. That's in the center of the city. But it was a more volatile place, because where I was in Bairro Militaire, because it's a consular residence is there, it's a very small, secure place. I still carried on doing my work. When I came back, I was having dinner with the then British High Commissioner, Tony Milson, who was a personal friend, because he invited me for dinner to discuss about the situation in Bissau. He was having an overview of it. And this was on Kairaba Avenue in a restaurant just by the Texaco or Tesco or something over there. And as we sat down having dinner, Amadou Samba walked in. Now he walked past me and nudged me on my shoulder and said in Wolof, Sumaraka Bugana Lagis, meaning, my brother, I would like to see you.
And this was Amadou Samba, the owner of the Observer
Yes,
newspaper.
that
Your,
is-
your boss,
Yes,
basically,
that is
your
correct.
overall boss.
Supposed boss, yes. So he said that and then walked past and sat at the bar. So the High Commissioner turned around and said to me, "Are you sure everything is all right?" Because he must have known who he is. I said, "It's fine by me. He's probably just here to have a meal." And just left it at that. And I think the High Commissioner was so uncomfortable. In the end, when we finished our dinner, he ordered his driver to drive me in his official car and take me back to my house and to get in touch with him if anything untoward happened. So I'm not comfortable. But we left it at that. And a week after, I was at work at the Observer. Sarian Sisek, that's the managing director, called me in his office. He said to me, "Well, Amadou Sambas told me he said he wants to see you, but he's not heard from you." I said, "Well, he never left me with any phone number, and I didn't think it was important because if it was, he knows he can find me at the Observer, so he'll come here or phone the office." So then I just left it and cracked on with my job. And then a few days later, Sarian called me in his office and said to me, "These people have asked me to sack you." He didn't.
Sorry, who called you to his office?
Sarian Sisi, the managing director, yes.
Okay, and who are these people he was
Yes, he
referring
never
to?
said who these people are. He said, "These people have asked me to sack you." I said, "But you're a good reporter and I have no reason to sack you." I said, "Well, what's the point in telling me that?" He said, "Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suspend you indefinitely as if you were sacked. You know, you don't just have to write. If these people don't see you writing anywhere, they'll think you've been sacked. Then Observer will continue paying your salaries. That's not a problem." I said to him, "That to me appears to be buying my silence. And, you know, in a sense, we'll pay you to stop writing." I said, "I'm not doing that. So I'm either working or I'm not." And on the second day, I got a letter from the office saying, your services have been terminated with immediate effect in the interest of both parties. So just a one-sentence letter.
And
That's how
do you know who those parties were?
I don't know who the other parties are. I know I'm the one party, but I don't know who the other parties are.
Okay, and who wrote this letter to you? Who
That
signed it?
was written and signed by Sarian Sisi, so part of the bundles of handed to them.
Did you eventually suspect who was behind your dismissal?
I can only assume it's the regime, because at the time there wasn't an iota of doubt that the newspaper doesn't belong to Amadou Samba, because for significant sacking the news editor that is so respected by all the journalists and staff is just absurd. And they brought in an editorial advisor in the name of Ngany Thomas, who was a known diehard APRC. And obviously, his mantra, what he always says is, he sat for 30 years without a job. Now he's been given a job and nobody's going to mess him around. And he would usually sit in the office and make sure he sees what story is going. Anyway, I usually come and refuse to give my story to the editor until he leaves the building. But he'll come there, and if he sees any controversial, State House knows. How did Chief Mani disappear? Through information from Sajat Tal, who was also planted there. And it wasn't Amadou Samba's paper at all. And now that became even more clear. Now, the Jana Commission, when we knew Kenneth Best was paid tens of thousands of dollars from the Central Bank of the Gambia, Amadou Samba wouldn't authorize payment from the Central Bank of the Gambia, would he?
Who would do that?
Tell me.
Sorry? Can you please tell us who you suspect would do something like that?
There was only one person who treated our central bank like his personal account as Yaya Jammeh. He tried to lie his own personal checks to withdraw money from the central bank. So who else would have authorized that?
And why do you think you were dismissed? Why do you think they wanted to get rid of you?
I think they had people on site who they think are not very fitting in what kind of thing they want. So obviously I wasn't the only one sacked, because after Pandirimba you got sacked as well. So it was nothing strange that this was a pattern they were taking.
And I would assume that the people they would normally sack would be those who are critical of the government or suspected to be critical of the government.
Indeed, yes.
And those who did not allow themselves to be used by the APRC.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us what subsequently happened after you were dismissed.
I think that was the last straw, to be honest. I was dismissed on the 1st of July, and obviously I took a holiday to just go to the UK. It's nothing to do with the Tony Milson British High Commissioner. I had no part to play in that. So I went to the UK, but gauging the whole situation, I thought I would be better there to do my work in other ways than being here if I want to leave for my country. So I stayed there.
And in total, you were arrested and detained on 5 consecutive occasions within a very short period of time.
Yeah.
This was between 1995 and 1999.
99, yes.
So you thought that you would be better off leaving the country.
Yeah. And subsequently it proved right, because in the end, I did realize we had even more trained Gambian journalists living in the United Kingdom due to going on self-exile or self-imposed exile or forced to leave the country than we had in the country. So we ended up setting up a sub-union of the Gambia Press Union there to be a backup for the union here. And we've used it to launch protests about human rights abuses against journalists to another level out there. Even went to Downing Street to launch a petition over an investigation into Data's death. And we were also there to support journalists that were in trouble, and we know if we are sent back here, it would be even more trouble. So it was significant that, yeah, I stayed there.
Right. Were you able to live with your family when you were going?
No, because at that moment I just left, and I've been there like 10 years before I thought it necessary to come back here.
And how old did you have any children when you were leaving?
When I was leaving, actually, my daughter wasn't born. It was just my woman who was about 6-7 months pregnant. And my daughter was born in my absence. And for 10 years of her life, I didn't have the chance to spend with her. And she sadly died when she was 14.
So you left her while she was still in the womb. This is your daughter.
Yeah.
And you didn't see her for 10 years.
Yeah. And
while you were in the UK.
Yes, I was in the UK. And when I did subsequently have to come, like when I've come, it's only for 2-3 weeks. And this is the only time I would spend with her for a year.
And she died about 3 years or 4 years after you first saw her. We're very sorry about that, Mr. Sowe, that you had to go through something like that.
That's okay.
Okay. Can you just kindly tell us what the impact this whole experience of yours has been? I mean, not only the arrest and detention at the various places where you were held, but also your subsequent exile away from your family.
It had a huge impact, mainly on my elderly mom in particular. Every time I've been arrested, it's like we've got a funeral at home. People were coming in, my mom was sat there very distressed, and as you know, the way the Gambian family works, they have the pressure on her, tell your son to stop this job, he'll end up getting killed, and that torments her as well. I've got to the point where she's told me, I don't want your money to live on if you carry on this job. But it didn't deter me, but in the Gambian context, we value what our parents say to us a lot. We put a lot of weight on what they stop us to do, not to do. But yes, that did. It affected my son, Ibrahim, who is here with me today. That's why he's very clingy. Ever since, he's always watching on me, checking where I'm going. The one good that's come out of it. He's read his law and he's off to Nigeria very soon to do his bar. So I probably wouldn't have been able to do that for him from here.
Indeed, and congratulations to you. What other impact has this had on you? Any other impact on your health or on your psychological well-being?
It's all been really psychological because, to be honest, all these times I've been arrested, I haven't for once been physically, I can't remember on any occasion where I've been physically tortured by anyone. It was just the mental torture, the psychological trauma of being put in degrading situations and treated inhumanely as if you just trash, just for trying to do your job as a journalist.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sowe. Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, that's the end of the witness's testimony. I will now hand over to the commissioners for any questions they may have, and then back to him for any final words he may have for the Gambian public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counsel, and thank you very much, Mr. Sowe, for your testimony. Commissioners, if you have any questions, please indicate. Commissioner Diallo, Imam Diallo, you have the floor, please.
Mr. Sowe, I'm very sympathetic towards the cause of journalists. How can we go about creating an opportunity for journalists to be provided for when they find themselves incarcerated or detained or without a job? Thank you.
I think that's a very important question you've asked there. You see, that's one impediment, because when you're only getting paid for stories you write, it brings the danger of just going for any story just to get money if you have to survive. And when journalists are detained and they happen to be the breadwinners of their family, it's not just the psychological trauma of them being in custody, it's also about worrying about their family outside. How are they going to survive? How are they going to live? And there tends to be a culture in the freelancing industry in this country. When you freelance, you should be able to write for any newspaper you want. But here, if you want your stories published, you probably have to owe loyalty to one particular media outlet. So you're the mercy of that media outlet. And I think there should be a provision somehow that if you choose to retain freelance journalists to just report for you, then there should be a retention fee that should get them going when the need arises. And I think the GPU can go a bit further. I know they've got a lot on their plate, but they can go a lot further in getting a fund that could be put in place to just help journalists in distress and most of their families as well. Maybe that answers your question.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, Mr. Sowe, would you have any final remarks to make? If so, please proceed to do so now.
Okay. All I would like to say is I've listened to all of my colleagues that have testified here and had some interesting stories, and I think the establishment of the TRRC is a proper good start, of course, in the right direction. In so doing, I think also this goes to both witnesses and victims and perpetrators. The starting point is being honest with ourselves, because if we don't know the truth or we come here and deceive this August House, there's a likelihood it'll be a futile exercise. The only way we can get somewhere is people to come forward, victims and perpetrators alike, be honest with themselves, be truthful to this commission, and hopefully it'll be a better Gambia, a Gambia where you can go about doing your work without worrying about being killed or vanishing overnight. Thank you for your work.
Thank you again very much indeed, Emma, for your testimony and for agreeing to come and testify before the Commission. Many, many thanks to you.
Yep.
We are going to take a 30-minute break and come back sharp noon. We have a bit of a tight schedule this morning, and so we would start on time at 12 noon. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.